I want to talk about where we're at in the real estate market here currently. It's end of November, just getting back from Thanksgiving weekend, long weekend, busy weekend in real estate. So we had that new listing in Millville that Jeremy put up. He had a pretty packed open house. I don't know how many people, at least 10 or 15 people. We have multiple offers on that
Oh
property.
wow,
So
that's awesome.
yeah, so here we are, late November, late fall, early winter, holiday weekend, multiple offers on a property. I did a Google search on real estate market, housing market, 2022, and just looking at everything that comes up, in order of the most recent. So even just from the past 5 days, you see articles that say like the real estate market is crashing, the real estate market is bouncing back, the real estate market is, not crashing, but it's slowing down. Prices are going up, prices are going down. Like there's so much conflicting information out there. And part of it probably has to do with the sources of the original information. So like news channels don't know anything about real estate. They don't know anything about anything, right? It's their job to report. So they're checking, whatever websites or whatever sources, and even you could talk to people in the business and just go around the office and ask, how's the market treating you to different real estate agents, and you'll get different answers depending on, you know, maybe where they do business, like within our local market. If we talked about this last weekend with like specializing in certain neighborhoods or certain areas as opposed to others. Um, or even just like the level of business that agent's doing and where they're getting their business from. But that's not like an accurate representation of what's going on across the market as a whole. So we look at once a month, we look at all the numbers of what's sold in the previous month, because that's when the bulk of the data comes in at the end of the month, and we can look at that month as a whole, and we can look at closed sales, we can look at pending sales, we can look at that whole month's inventory as far as new listings. You can't look at it from week to week. You definitely can't look at it from day to day. I can't say, oh, there was less listings yesterday than there was the day
Hmm.
before, so the market's going down. There's not that much activity that's happening locally on a day-to-day basis. If you try to go out further and look at the entire country to see what happened yesterday, what happened last week, what happened last month, you might get very different info, because what's happening here is a lot different than what's happening in Florida or New York or California or Arizona or any other state. Even in Ohio, it's different. So a lot of these like websites that are published, these media, national media news websites like bankrate.com and MSNBC and all these websites are publishing these articles and probably talking about them on the news too. I don't watch the news, so I don't really know, but I would imagine that they are. And they're basing it a lot of the times on old data from September, October, maybe even older than that. They're comparing it to data from with no context, and they're just comparing too much data. So like I talked about, if we look at what happened yesterday, that's not enough data to really make any kind of conclusions or recognize any kind of trends. If we look at everything that happened last month across the entire country, that's in some ways too much data, but at the same time, it still might not be enough data to really come to a conclusion. So, I mean, we're in the business. We see what's happening every single weekend, so we can at least put some context to statistics and what we're seeing out there. Um, and what I'm seeing out there is that the market's bouncing back a little bit. There's still a lot of demand. There's not as much demand right now, presently at the moment, as there was a few months ago. But when we talk about demand, I think you have to talk about like actual demand. Is there not demand because people don't want places to live anymore? Is there not demand because everybody, we talked about generational, age groups and stuff like that last week. Did everybody in the prime first time home buying age group of 27 to 39, did they all buy houses already, and so they don't need to buy a house again for 5 or 6 years? I don't think that's what happened. Um, Or is everybody just kind of calming down a little bit because, yeah, the interest rates are up, the home prices are up, the inventory is down a little bit. So less inventory means less for buyers to choose from, so they're not going to come to the market. And the seasonal thing. And what I'm seeing right now is the exact same thing that we see at this time of year every single year. And a lot of agents check out typically at this time of year. And don't come back until January or February. So
yeah, take a vacation.
take a long vacation or a staycation. They just don't show up for their business, especially the last 2 years when, we set a goal for 100 transactions last year, and when you have like 70 going into June, it makes it really easy to kind of want to coast for the second half of the year. And that's, whether your goal was 10 transactions or 20 transactions, most agents exceeded their goals in the first half of last year, or at least were on pace, to exceed their goals by the first half of last year. Interestingly enough, I know people that, their goal was 20 and they sold 16 in the first half of the year, and then they only sold 3 in the second half, so they didn't even hit their goal, but they were certainly on pace to blow it out of the water. So that happens every single year too. The market will slow down. There is less buyer demand out there in the market in the fall and winter months, but there is still demand. It's still there. People still need to buy homes. There's people that are out in the market still buying homes during that time, but there's also people sitting at home kind of waiting. And a couple things I'll say about that. For one, if everybody else is waiting, then you should probably be trying to set yourself apart and looking at what are the real pros and cons of waiting. Generally, if everybody else is doing one thing, it typically makes sense to go the other direction. If everybody's buying, you should be selling. If everybody's selling, you should be buying. I think that's what Warren Buffett says. So, right now there's not as many people buying, and yet the demand is still out there. So I think that means a couple things. I think for buyers, I think there's less competition out there in the market. Now could be the perfect time to buy. For sellers, it means the same thing it means every year. There's less buyers out there, but the buyers who are out there are serious. You just have to know what market you're going into and know how to approach it in terms of how you price your property, how you market your property, your expectations on, is the house going to sell in one day or is it going to sell in a month? The other thing that I'm seeing right now, or I think that we're all seeing, because I've talked to other agents, I've gotten calls from other agents that are like, I've never had to do an inspection, I've never had to negotiate an inspection reply before on a listing, and we priced the home, we felt like and I'm having this experience too on probably 2 or 3 listings. Homes have older roofs, homes have older HVAC. Nothing's broken. Everything still works. Most people, I wouldn't recommend go out and put on a new roof and go put in a new HVAC system just because what you have is a little bit old. We can offer home warranties. Obviously it's reflected in the price, but most homes in Pittsburgh that people are buying don't have brand new roofs on them. So whether the roof needs replaced in 2 years or 5 years, if you're buying a house that doesn't have a brand new roof, which is going to be the majority of them, you should be planning within sometime in the next 2 to 5 years to put on a new roof. And I'm just using a roof as an example because that's probably one of the biggest expenses, and it's it's an item that doesn't last forever. And they last, anywhere from 25 to, of course, now the newer roofs last 40 or 50 years. But a whole bunch of people that got roofs 20 to 30 years ago that are the old style roofs that are only made to last 25 years. And, we priced the home accordingly, knowing, hey, it's got an older roof. The new buyer's going to have to put on a new roof at some point in the next couple of years. That's reflected in the price. And then the buyers come through and they make an offer, and then they do a home inspection, and their home inspector tells them, hey, the roof's old. You should, ask the seller to replace it, which is ridiculous. But I've seen like 3 or 4 reply to inspections in the last couple of weeks with buyers asking sellers to replace roofs and to replace furnaces in air conditioning units and windows and sliding doors, and literally like 10 or 20 or $30,000 worth of stuff they're asking for as a reply to a home inspection on a house that was, priced to reflect needing all of those updates, as 90% of the houses out there are going to need most of those anyways, unless you're buying a brand new house. Even brand new houses, I've seen brand new houses that need a new air conditioning unit 2 years later. So like, you shouldn't be buying a house if you can't afford some of that stuff. Now, if the condition or the age of something is unknown, which can mean a lot of things. If somebody's been in a house for 20 years and they don't know the age of the roof, they never replaced it, so you can assume it's probably older than 20 years old. So then you should kind of reflect that in your initial offer and your expectations. Now, if you do a home inspection and there's leaks in the roof and stuff like that, then yeah, you probably didn't sign up for that. The seller should probably do something about it, but I wouldn't necessarily jump to, spend $10,000 or $20,000 on a new roof. So right now in this market, though, the buyers are seeing these headlines and they're thinking that they have this leverage, and they think they're the only buyers in town when they're not, and agents have no idea what they're doing, and they're like letting these buyers write up these replies where they're asking for basically a whole entire new house. Put in the offer at or below the asking price, and then come back and ask for $30,000 worth of new stuff during the home inspection. And in almost every single case, for our sellers, we simply go back and say no, or we'll say, some of these items are valid, but most of them are not, or it's valid, but it was reflected in the price, it was disclosed, everything was, you should have known and you should have factored it in. And in fact, I've had conversations with some agents where I tell them, hey, your people are aware of the age of the roof, the age of the HVAC, they know we have the warranty, this is what my clients can afford to do during the initial negotiation. They come in with an offer and we go back and say, this is what we can afford to do. We're not going to be able to come down, anymore during the home inspections, keep in mind. So hopefully your client has a pretty good idea of what they're getting into. And agents will tell me, up and down, oh yeah, absolutely, they're not going to ask for anything, hardly. And then they do the inspection and they ask for everything. But we go back and we say, no, like, we told you what it was, we reflected it in the price, here's our options, just to remind the buyers, because a lot of buyers don't even understand that they can ask for all of these things, but that doesn't mean that they're going to get them. The seller's options are give the buyers what they want, basically counter offer the buyers with, hey, this is what we are willing to do. Or go back to the buyers and say, we're not going to do any of that stuff. You can terminate if you want to. We're going to go back on the market. Or we're going to do some of that stuff off your list, but if we do, we're going to go back on the market later at a higher price, because our original price reflected the age of all of these items in our house. And maybe your inspector did find out that, hey, the roof's in worse shape than what we thought it was. You're right, we should replace the roof. That's a valid item, but it also increases the value of the property. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I mean, that goes back to your expectations and your pricing strategy going into the listing, right? So like, if we went into a listing at whatever the price was, we have a ton of traffic and we have a ton of buyers and they're all interested, and the feedback is, well, we felt the price was a little bit high based on the age of all the mechanicals. They love the cosmetics, they love the house, they love the location. They just aren't in a position where they can take on the improvements and the updates that it needs. If you're getting traffic and that's the feedback you're getting, and then in some cases, we do a price reduction and the sellers feel like, okay, yeah, this is a no-brainer. The feedback is our price is too high based on the age. We were getting the traffic, which is, basically as agents, that's our job, is to bring in the traffic and then negotiate, the offers. But if we're not getting any offers and that's the feedback we're getting, we reduce the price a little bit. And then the buyer comes in and, again, they ask for all that stuff. Well, hey, if we were gonna do all that stuff, we have a pretty good feeling that we could have sold the house at the higher price where we were before. Yeah. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna put it back on the market at the higher price. And in most cases, those buyers come back and say, well, no, never mind. We do need a place to live, or, we are willing to do the things that we probably were already willing to do when we put in the initial offer, right? So basically, we bluffed, or our inspector, kind of blew our, our heads up and made us feel like we could ask for anything we want, and that we would get it. Nobody on our side took the time to tell us this is how the seller can respond, and this is what options the seller has. Some sellers don't have those options. Some sellers are, under contract to buy another house, and they're closing, in a couple weeks, and they need to sell their current house in order to buy the next one. So they're up against a wall, or they're, between a rock and a hard place, and they might be willing to do that. But, that goes back to having a good agent who knows what they're doing in terms of negotiations, and probably doesn't expose that information to the buyers, right? Sometimes it's in everybody's best interest, in your client's best interest, to tell the other party, like, hey, we're in a hurry, we need to get this sold. And a lot of the times it's not. Some agents, they say too much. Sometimes they say not enough. So, my advice for the agents out there would be, take time before you're having a conversation with your clients. Take time before you have a conversation with, a co-op agent or another agent who's representing their clients on the other side of a transaction. Obviously, take time before you would talk to any other clients directly, which should pretty much only be happening at like an open house or something in that setting. But think about what you want to say. Think about how it could be received on the other side. Think about what options does that person have, and what are they going to do with that information you're giving them. And, go into all of your conversations and all of your negotiations knowing, what are my client's options, what are the other side's options. And usually when you do that, the good negotiators come in with an offer that's fair enough that they don't even have to negotiate, right? Like some of the best deals we do, they come in with an initial offer that's great, and the seller doesn't even counter offer. Or, like I had another one recently where they came in with a really good offer on a house that's been on the market for a little while. We listed it at the end of September. We knew what the market's always like at the end of September. We hoped it would get a little better in October. Interest rates went up, so it really didn't. We saw traffic, but we weren't getting offers on most of our listings, and we were hearing the same things from other agents. In November, things started to pick up again. All the listings that have been sitting on the market September and October started getting offers. We had one in particular where we didn't have a ton of traffic. We had some. We got an offer. It was a great offer. Sellers didn't even want to counter. I said, well, let me at least see if I can go back and get something out of them. If you guys are comfortable where you're at, that's what's important to me. But let's think down the line. They're going to do a home inspection, and if they come back and they ask for $2,000 worth of stuff, you're going to regret not countering $2,000 higher. They were $10,000 under the asking price with their initial offer. Countering them back $2,000 over their offer, which isn't even like meeting them halfway, it's still in their favor. They came in $10,000 under, you're countering them at $2,000 above that. Most buyers are going to take that deal. That they're probably thinking we were going to come back with something even higher, to be honest. But they might not have been. Their initial offer was fair. We came in $2,000 over that. They did their home inspection. They came back. They asked for like $6,000 worth of stuff on that one, which the house needs some work. A lot of the stuff they asked for was valid, but we're still going to go back and counter them at probably $3,000 or $4,000, and it's going to end up a lot closer to where it should have been at the very beginning. I guess point being that agent knew what she was doing, was setting her clients' expectations. Like, look, they haven't had a ton of traffic, so we're going to come in under the asking price, but we're not going to come in 30% under the asking price and then do a home inspection and then ask for 10% more off the price, or, basically for them to repair a whole bunch of stuff, which if they would have done originally, the house probably would have sold for higher anyways. A lot of agents think they have this leverage because they're not looking at the other side. They're looking at how many days has it been on the market. Oh my God, I'll bet they're desperate. And they're making this like assumption like, oh, nobody's going to buy this house because it's been sitting on the market forever. Somebody will buy the house. Any house, every house, somebody will buy it eventually at whatever the house is worth or close to that price. Good agents can, get you 1 or 2% more. Good agents can save you money during the inspection period and navigating, those kind of negotiations, and if there's appraisal issues and kind of navigating those, and making sure that to protect your bottom line. But at the end of the day, a bad agent could end up costing you a lot in those stages of the transactions. But a really good agent's not going to usually get you 10% more than what the house is worth.
So for a house that the seller doesn't really care about, like if they want to sell it fast, or if they want to wait, like what's the best time of the year that you should recommend them to list the house?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it sounds like what I'm saying probably is it's not a good time of the year to list. That's not what I'm saying. I think it's always a good time to sell. You just have to have your expectations set right. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. If you've put a ton of money into landscaping, and you've got an in-ground pool, and you've got all of these exterior things on your house that really set it apart from the market, generally I say landscaping is a really good investment. You get a really good return on your investment. I'm sure there's limits to that. In-ground pools, we used to always say that's a neutral. Some people don't want to take care of a pool. It's actually kind of a negative. Some people love a pool and it's a positive. But if you're eliminating half the buyers out of your buyer pool, then it's not really working in your favor one way or the other. After COVID, a lot of people, were staying at home, and public pools were closed, and people were just staying away from, even when they reopened, just staying away from like public pools and spending more time at home. So they were investing more in their homes. I would say in-ground pools became a little bit more of a positive. I don't know if that'll last forever. We're in Pittsburgh, so we only get 3 months out of the year that you can use your pool. So a lot of houses still don't have them, and it's not like it's something that we deal with all the time. But we did, we have seen a couple homes that they sold for what they sold for because somebody fell in love with the exterior of the house. That's going to always be better in the warmer months, when the pool's open. And, not only that, but that goes back to inspections and stuff too. If the buyer can't inspect the pool, then they're taking a big risk. So they're going to have to be comfortable with that. And usually they know that going in, like the pool's closed, it's November, we're not going to be able to inspect the pool, or they don't have too much expectation. But if other big items start popping up around the house during the inspection, then it all adds onto the list. Oh my God, it needs a roof. Oh my God, the furnace is older. We don't, it's fine now, but it could need replaced. Oh my God, we don't know about the pool. Now they start seeing all these big like what ifs and these big potential problems, and it can get kind of interesting. So it depends on the house. The other thing I'll say is, the timing of waiting until the spring. If, most people, again, we're here at the end of November, most people that are getting their house ready to sell with the holidays and everything coming up are going to end up being into January anyways, right? So I'm certainly not rushing anybody and telling them, hey, we've got to hurry up, pull out all the stops and get your house on the market this week. But telling somebody in September or August, hey, you should wait until January or February, that's like 6 or 7 months almost. That's a long time to wait. That's half a year. Why is that person moving in the first place? They might not be able to wait half a year. If you've got a job relocation or school or whatever the issue may be, that that's a long time. The other thing is, if you're worried about interest rates and stuff like that, there's no sign that what happens in the springtime is going to be better than what it is today. Interest rates are actually down. I got market updates on Friday, and the rates were in the lower sixes, like high fives even, like 5.5 to 6, right? I had to think about that for a second, but yeah. But nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about, oh my God, the rates are down. And this is like, these articles that I'm reading are still saying, well, the rates are up to almost 7. And it's like, no, they're back down again. Your information is 3 weeks old. It changes every single day. The time it takes for a MSNBC journalist to make all their phone calls and put all the work in that they may or may not be putting in to writing, an article, I don't know how long it takes, but apparently it's long enough that they don't know what the rates are. Because I got rate updates last Wednesday, and I saw articles this morning that were saying the rates are at 7. That's not true. They're back down. 5.75 is not a bad rate. I don't see it being much lower than that in the spring or the summertime. And if it does, then 6 months from now you can probably refinance. The other thing is if the rates go down, then the appreciation is going to go right back to where it started.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking to buy a house, let's say you have to sell and buy. Yeah, you're going to sell for a little bit more because of the appreciation,
Mm-hmm.
but you're also going to pay a little bit more for the house that you're buying. And if you're upsizing, or even if you're downsizing, if there's any upgrade whatsoever, if the house you're buying is more expensive than the house you're selling, then look at that percentage-wise. Proportionally, it's costing you more money. So you're better off to sell and buy right now. And if the rates don't go up, or if the rates don't go down, then you haven't lost anything by doing it now as opposed to waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And if the rates go up, then it really benefited you to move now. And obviously, you can see where I'm going with let's say you don't have to buy a house, you already own your other house, but you have a house to sell. If you wait until the springtime and the rates go up, then there's going to be even less buyers than there are now.
Yeah.
The rates go down a little bit, then you might sell for a little bit more, but there's no guarantee on that. Some houses are rough on the exterior.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, like my grass grows in, like some of my grass is dead and it's brown and there's like patches of it. My backyard's beautiful, but the grass is terrible. A nice little covering of snow might make that look, better, make you see it kind of for what it is. Now, I don't have a pool, so nobody cares about that, right? My kids can still use my yard like year round. It's still a selling point. We could take where I have like that basketball court and put a pool right there. That'd be awesome 3 months out of the year, but in the wintertime, it's like the kids can't even go out there because the pool's closed and we don't want them falling through the cover or messing with it, So that's another thing with the time of year. I don't think waiting is ever a good strategy. If you're looking at putting work into your house, then you could look at again, without knowing exactly what the market's going to be. If it's going to take you 2 or 3 months to put some work into your house, and that puts you going on the market with a house that's in tip-top shape in February or March, then in a lot of cases, that's probably going to be a good strategy.
But spring and summer,
Mm-hmm.
there are more listings, so you have more competition when you're trying to sell your house.
Another good point.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, more competition on both sides, sellers and buyers. Right. Perfect. Good call. And I talk to people in the springtime that want to do renovations to their house, and I have to tell them the same thing, right? So this is like the opposite conversation that you have to have is, hey, do you want to put 6 months worth of work in this house just to list it in November, when we, again, don't know what the interest rates are going to be, don't know what the market's going to be, but we know seasonally what it's going to be. Or should we take our chances and put it on the market now? Here's the other option that, again, people lose sight of and people make assumptions. Mostly agents. Let's say you put a house on the market in November and the market's not giving you the offers that you want. Mm-hmm. You can always take it back down and relist it in February. If the buyers are there, the buyers are going to be there. So you're not going to sell the house if you don't have it on the market, most likely. Same thing in the spring. You could list your house in the spring and list it at a higher price, and if you don't get what you want, take it off the market, do some work to it, and then relist it during the holidays or whatever. But don't wait for the sake of waiting. That would be my advice.
Yeah.
That's my advice, I think, for the sellers is get a good agent who can help you right off the bat with setting good expectations on the market. And knowing your timing and knowing your schedule and knowing what marketing you're going to need to do. And I'll just dive into that a little bit here since we're not on any kind of time limits here on this podcast format. When we talk about marketing the house the right way, a lot of agents will do professional photos. A lot of agents now are doing videos. Drone is almost standard at this point. 360 tours are a really valuable tool that a lot of agents are doing. So that's all great, but they're doing all of that and then they're putting it all out there as soon as the property lists, which is when you're going to have the most exposure out there in the marketplace. So on one hand that makes sense, but then what are they doing after that? If the property is going to be on the market for 3 weeks, do you do a whole bunch of marketing the first day that it's listed and then just sit back and wait, or do you kind of time out your marketing? Do you have price reductions built into your initial price and into your marketing plan, knowing hey, it's September, we're not going to if we just sit here and do nothing, the house definitely isn't going to sell, so let's get it on the market, but let's kind of pace ourselves in the market for the next month so that we're still in a good position and we're not just sitting there stale on the market a couple weeks from now, if that's how long it takes. Nobody knows at the end of the day how long it's going to take. And then we have other sellers who will give them their pricing options, and here's the various pricing strategies that we can use for your listing, and they don't want to take that risk. They'd rather just price it a little bit aggressively. And even in September, even in October, November, if you do that, you can still get multiple offers and the house will still sell for more than what you're asking, with minimal contingencies in the first weekend that it's on the market. But those expectations have to be right. I've seen other people put their house on the market at what they think is a low price and think that it's going to sell for over. They don't get the multiple offers. It doesn't go for over the asking price, and then they're upset that they got a full price offer. We don't ever want that to be the case either. And yet, we've had that, and we've went back to the buyers and said, basically, here's our options. We can take the house off the market, do some updates to it, and put it back on at a higher price later. We had a lot of traffic, and that was the feedback that we got. So we appreciate your offer. Right now they're trying to weigh out, is this the best case scenario? You're not saying hey, we know we were asking this price and you're willing to give it to us, but we want more, because that could come off as greedy. But we were saying, hey, we have new information that we didn't have when we listed the house at that price, and that's that it could potentially be worth a lot more if we did some work, and we're not in a hurry, so this is what we're weighing. And a lot of the times the buyers still aren't going to like that, but that's when you have a conversation about, okay, what would it take for them to sell it right now? So we've had homes where we only have one offer come in at the asking price, and we're still able to negotiate to get it a little above asking price. In cases where that's fair and reasonable to do. If you're lucky to even be getting the asking price, then you're lucky to be getting the asking price. So that goes back to setting your expectations up front, so that you're not shooting for the moon and then turning off the perfect buyer by asking for more. Right? That goes back to us countering an offer $2,000 over instead of $5,000 over their offer price, because that there was no reason to do that. There was no justification for that. The sellers had their expectations already where it was, and we were already pretty much exceeding them, so there's no need to do that. So all right, so that was all number one, is finding a good agent who can help you with your expectations and understanding the market and strategy and all of that. The second thing, if you have really old mechanical items in your house, big expensive items in your house, get them checked out. I know one seller who earlier in the year, they had their roof looked at because it was one of those things. They bought the house 10 years ago. This wasn't one of my clients, by the way, but I was kind of involved with it. They bought the house, 10 years ago. The inspector said, hey, your roof's only got a couple years left on it. They never looked at it, never touched it again. I think maybe they did end up getting a leak. Agent sent a roofer over to the house. They said, yeah, you guys definitely need a new roof, and it's going to cost $15,000, which I think was probably a little bit high, but not completely out of the range of what it should have been. And they might have needed new gutters and the whole 9 yards too, so that might be why the price was high. But so they did all that work, took some time. They had to find a house to move into, so they finally found a house, put in an offer contingent on their house selling, put their house on the market, ton of traffic, one offer, full asking price. They didn't go back and ask for any more money or anything like that. They took the offer. The buyer did a home inspection. They still came back and asked for a whole bunch of other stuff, right?
Oh, wow.
The seller's basically in a position where they're going to go back and just say, no, we put a roof on the house. You're not going to go, like, here's where you look at what's the buyer's options at this point. They're not going to go and find a better house with a new, brand new roof and better everything else for the price where they had it listed, where they're not going to be competing in multiple offers, or they're not going to have to make some sort of other concessions. So the seller's already given the buyer a very fair offer. And the seller doesn't have any more room to budge. And if they are going to do some of the things on the buyer's list of requests of items to repair and replace, then they have the option to put the house back on the market again at a higher price. My expectation, that negotiation is kind of still going on as we speak, as far as I know. My expectation is that buyer's going to take the house as is, basically. I think they're going to do a couple little things that were valid and reasonable. But, the seller's not going to make any major concessions, and I don't think the buyer's going to take their chances out there in the market where there's no other comparable homes in that area. And if they wait until spring, then, again, who knows? Maybe the rate goes down a little bit, but then what happens with the competition? So I think that one's going to work out in that case for the sellers. Now, fortunately, they didn't have to negotiate around the roof needing replaced. And I think the agent did a really good job of setting their expectations. Like, hey, if we list this house with this roof as is, it's $15,000 for you to fix. But for us to price it accordingly to actually get an offer and get a buyer, we're probably going to have to take like $50,000 off of the asking price. They didn't want to do that, obviously, so they came up with the money. They invested the $15,000. That nobody wants to replace that roof, right?
Yeah.
They did it, and I think it'll work in their favor in the long run. And they're getting the perfect house, as far as I know. They waited a couple months to find the perfect house, and it came up, and they did, and they had their contingency in their offer to sell their current house, and everybody's on the same page, and it'll end up working out great. So, but again, still, houses out there getting multiple offers, like that one that Jeremy had this weekend too. So the market's still what the market always has been, and that's unique to every home, every neighborhood, every situation. And you really should be working with a local expert to get your information, and not reading headlines, and not reading Facebook posts, and not watching TikToks from real estate agents in other cities who may or may not even be doing a lot of business, and they may just be repeating what they saw other agents saying on TikTok or what they saw in a headline. Which is probably smart marketing. If you see the same thing in 10 different headlines, then it's safe to say everybody's talking about it, and that you should jump on board. And that's where I go back to, if everybody's saying something, then you probably shouldn't jump on board. You should probably look the other way and say, what is there more to this? That's just good advice in general, I think, about anything. So that is the current market climate.
I also have a question. It's related
Yes.
to the real economy.
Okay.
So as many people got laid off, like, do you think that have anything to do with like the real estate market?
That was another thing. I saw an article that said that with people getting laid off and having variable rate mortgages on their homes, what did they say? They said homes are going to be flooding the market and people are going to be getting foreclosed on. There's a couple things wrong with that statement. That was literally an economist. I could go back and look at the article here, but I don't even know where. I do have the article actually right in front of me. I don't know where that guy was getting any of that information. So people are not getting laid off. I'm pretty sure the employment rate is super high right now. I think that's actually, and this is part of the economy that I don't get into because it doesn't make any sense to me, frankly. But I think that's one of the problems with inflation, is that everybody's working, and everybody's got money, and everybody's spending money. And I guess that's bad somehow. But so you don't have a problem with jobs currently, anyways. You don't have variable rate mortgages. Nobody did that, and nobody needed to do that for like 10 years. I only saw variable rate mortgages coming back for the first time since I even got into real estate earlier this year, like a few months ago, because the rates were rising and people were worried about their affordability, so they were going into more like creative financing. I don't know too many people that actually did that, but I know a small handful, and of that small handful, I don't think any of them were in jeopardy of if the rate goes up. Well, first of all, it's different now, anyways, because they're like locked in for a certain period of time. So if they got the variable rate mortgage in May, whatever it went up to in October, I don't think even affected them. But let's say it did, I don't think it has a tremendous impact, negative impact on their affordability, and is going to lead to them getting foreclosed on. Put it that way. I don't know the percentage exactly, but it's the vast majority of people do not have a variable rate mortgage on their home. They have a fixed rate mortgage. So if you bought your house in January at a 3% interest rate, your interest rate's still 3%. So why do you even care what's what's going on with the rates out there? Don't even read these headlines. And then the other thing was about foreclosures, and it said like there would be a rush of people to sell their homes in the market. So yeah, I guess if unemployment was super high, again, people don't even have variable rate mortgages, so we're not even going to look at that. But if unemployment was super high and people needed money and were looking at getting their homes foreclosed on, I think they would sell, because the average equity on a home in the United States is like 50%. Nobody's gonna let their $400,000 home that they only owe $200,000 on get foreclosed and just give up that $200,000 in equity.
Yeah.
You could sell the house, even if there's a rush to the market. You could sell it for $350,000, which is 50,000 off of 400,000. I don't even know what that is. That's 1/8, so that's like 12% under the value of the house. That's a pretty significant discount. You sell the house at that price and you still walk away with $150,000 in your pocket after your realtor fees and taxes and all of that stuff. You probably still walk away with $125,000 in your pocket. You can go and rent a place for $2,000 a month for 5 years, like a long time, and just live off of that $125,000. Put it this way: if the job you got laid off from was a $70,000 salary, you can live for over a year and a half off of your 125, right? So I don't see that being something that happens. The foreclosure thing, anyways. Even if there was a rush of people putting their homes on the market at not a 12.5% discount, but closer to the actual values of what those homes right now, what we would say today, are worth, there's still plenty of buyers out there looking to buy. So that's where you're always going to have, does somebody need to sell their house right now today in this market? They're going to have to price it a little bit lower because of the number of buyers who are out there today actively in the market, versus can they price it so that if they have to wait 2.5 or 3 months until it gets into January, February, which is typically when the springtime market starts, it'll sell then. That's the question. Most people, at the end of the day, can afford to wait 2.5 months to sell their home if it's going to mean $50,000 more dollars in their pocket, or some significant or substantial amount that's going to make a big difference to them. So currently there's not a big problem with unemployment. I do know that some of the larger, like we're in Pittsburgh, so like the number one employer is UPMC Medical Centers, basically the hospital and insurance networks here in Pittsburgh and all of Western Pennsylvania. We're always going to need healthcare, so I don't think the people who actually work for them are in too much jeopardy. But I know that a lot of like the construction industry around here survives off of hospital renovations and expansions and new when a new hospital is being built, that's like job security for those construction companies for 3, 4, 5 years. They survive off of that. But even in between that, there's always renovation projects and repurposing a wing of the hospital that maybe it was a COVID wing that that they modified in some kind of way, and now they're going to turn it into something else. That stuff happens every couple years. I know some of the larger hospital networks have put freezes on new projects, And that just makes sense because they're not, even though they have the money to do it, they're not spending their own money to do those projects a lot of the times. They're taking out loans. Um, you know, contractors are taking out bonds and stuff like that to secure their, their end of the work, I guess. So when that money becomes more expensive or harder to get for those companies, that will slow down the way they spend money. I mean, even in 2008, 2009, they had just finished building Children's Hospital, which was a huge, like, 5-year job here in Pittsburgh. But they did a major expansion on Passavant Hospital somewhere around that time, probably the later end of that time, 2012 maybe. They did major expansions on various other hospitals because I was in the mechanical contracting field at that time. And I worked at West Penn Hospital, I worked at Shadyside Hospital, I worked at various different clinics that were opening up, or parts of hospitals that they were turning into clinics, and all of these different things. So there was still jobs that needed to get done. As soon as the economy kind of changed and interest rates went down and it was easier for them to access money, then they started building like Wexford Hospital from the ground up. Like that was, I don't know how much that project was, but that was a big project and they literally built it from the ground up. So they're not going to be doing that if they don't have to, but they can only hold off so long on a lot of these projects. But they have put a freeze, from what I hear, on some of those on any projects, but that's temporary. They're not stopping anything that they currently have on the books. So like the people that I talk to that are still in that field, they've still got jobs on the books. They've still got contracts that have been awarded, that have been contracts that have been signed for jobs and projects that haven't even started yet, that'll take them well into next year. And in that period of time, in the next 6 months, again, if we're all having this conversation banking on the interest rates and everything else getting better in the springtime, then that'll affect that part of the business too, which is like a whole nother thing that I didn't even plan on getting into, but I had this conversation over the weekend. In 2012, I was in mechanical contracting field. A lot of people that I knew were in like the construction fields and stuff like that. I mean, part of it is just like my own personal growth or change, whatever you want to call it. But I do feel like now, if we're looking at newer first-time home buyers and you look at the demographics, there's probably less people in that 28 to 27 to 35 age range who are contractors or construction workers, as opposed to something IT or healthcare related, right? So that affects the people when they're buying a house. Because I look at, like, we bought a house in a buyer's market, we did a home inspection, we didn't ask for anything. People that I know that are selling their houses now, that we're having these conversations, that are like, yeah, when we bought the house, the inspector told us the roof only had 5 years left on it, we didn't care, and now it's 10 years later and we're selling our house. These conversations I'm having every single day. And what do these people do? They're electricians, they're plumbers, they're they work for a mechanical contractor, they're HVAC workers, all of these different things. The people that are buying their homes work in IT. They work for Google, or they work for UPMC. They don't know how to lift a hammer. So when that home inspector comes through and says, hey, this GFI needs replaced, they're like, oh my God, how's that going to get done? We're going to have to ask the seller because they don't know how to do it. When you take somebody who's handy, who's in like a construction field, even if they're not an electrician, which, by the way, if you need electrical work done on your house, you probably should just call an electrician. But I know that 10 years ago, myself and most of the people that I knew weren't doing that. They were doing it themselves because you had the tools and you've seen it done from a distance, looking over the shoulder of some electrician on a job site, or somebody, and you're like, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. And we're starting to see that change. So I think that plays into the, these expectations as well. I don't know where to go with that one way or the other, but I think that it's something that I've noticed, that people selling the houses that are, in the 35 to 45 age group are, the buyers are asking for the same things that came up on their home inspection 10 years earlier that they didn't care about then and they never cared about in the meantime. But it's a big deal to this new generation of home buyers. So that's just an observation. that I've noticed, and I think it has a lot to do with demographics of employment and
Yeah,
jobs and
I
stuff
think
like
it's
that.
because in the past couple decades, like Pittsburgh, they're like I think healthcare is like the top one industry in
Right.
Pittsburgh right now, and then we also got a lot of technology company moving into Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why the demographic changed.
For sure,
Yeah.
which is great. I mean, that's because it typically, let's be honest, those jobs pay a little bit higher. I guess typically, or they can anyways. There's more. It's a more of a growing industry. The construction industry is not in Pittsburgh. Manufacturing is certainly not. Construction is at the mercy of the economy and these large hospital organizations and schools, which are funded by the government, which has to do with the economy and everything else. So, and not only that, but like we're in Pittsburgh, so we're weather dependent too, depending on what construction trade you're in. So, yeah, it definitely adds some overall economic security and everything like that to our area, which is another reason why you know good or bad about what field you're in, as long as there's job security and there's income and there is a thriving economy in some way, at the end of the day, if that electrician can sell his house to an IT worker or somebody who works in healthcare for more money because of what the economy's doing and because there's a demand of people coming into the area because of our growing economy and job force, then that's definitely a good thing for sure. Like I said, it was just an observation. So, what else? What do you have? Any other observations or questions, Kelly?
I think I have one more.
Yeah.
So during like the holiday season, like people tend to not want to move because like Christmas is coming, so they don't want to take all their stuff out of the house, or they don't want to move in right before Christmas, or maybe they want to home right before Christmas party or something.
Right.
So like, can that be a factor like that market is slowing down?
I mean, the holidays, it's always hit or miss, right? So like Thanksgiving weekend, we had a ton of traffic on a house. We have multiple offers. Now, that's in an area where there hasn't been much inventory all year long. It's at a price point which is great for that area, but significantly less than the median in Pittsburgh. So there's going to be a lot of demand there. Versus, if we were listing a much more expensive house in a different area, it might not have been the same result. We have more expensive houses in more popular areas, and more expensive areas that are listed right now on the market. We didn't have the same traffic or multiple offers over there. They weren't new listings, but same thing. Although we did have some traffic. So, holidays can be hit or miss. There's the end of the year. And this goes back to the economy a little bit too. So one thing we've seen less of this year, I think, in my opinion, is relocations. So typically towards the end of the year is when companies are looking to spend money, make moves, do big things. They're opening a new department, or they're expanding or growing in some sort of way, and they're going to transfer somebody from somewhere to Pittsburgh, or from Pittsburgh to somewhere else. Those kind of relocations to me seem like they always come towards the end of the year. That's when those companies want to spend the money. They get it off their books and tax write-offs and all of that. I've seen less of that this year, but I don't think it's gone because, again, companies still need to spend money. And not every company out there is losing money either. Most companies probably aren't losing money. So they still have money to spend, and they're still worried about their taxes and all of that for next year. But I have seen a little less. Again, it's still November. We've still got the entire month of December, so we'll see what happens as far as relocations go. Those are the people that are really serious that need to move because their job is telling them, you start in January. So that's a big part of the market. And of course, there's other reasons and other people that just need to move. Maybe it's not a relocation necessarily, but they're starting a new job or something like that in the new year. So that goes back to the house thing too. There's some houses that decorated with they've got high ceilings. You put a 15-foot Christmas tree in there, and somebody walks in that's like a Hallmark movie, and they fall in love, and they just can't unsee themselves living there. They get that vision in their head, and they're like, oh my God, this is what I've wanted my entire life, right? that is a selling point, as opposed to, you know, we've got this fireplace, we've got these tall ceilings and all of this stuff, but it's summertime, so you're not going to be spending time in this family room anyways, kind of thing. So every house is a little bit different, every neighborhood and every market, but homes will still sell during the holidays. We're at the point now where a lot of homes going under contract probably will be looking to close in the new year anyways, but there's definitely going to be, in the next week or two here, I'm sure, a rush of, we'll probably see 3 to 5, hopefully 5. It'll probably be closer to 3, but transactions where buyers want to close before the end of the year for sure.
Yeah, we'll see how the December market goes.
Yeah, we'll see. That's all that we can do, and we will make sure that we bring the stats and bring the data and the observations to the audience here, whoever they are, wherever they are. So, anything else? Any closing points?
I think that's all for today.
Awesome. Well, if you're still listening or watching, thanks for hanging in there with us this long, and I guess we'll see them on the next episode.